What's the most weird, terrifying confession you've heard from someone that was drunk? That they steal money from passed out drunk hookups. That's the last time this person came to hang out at my place. My now ex-girlfriend confessed to having to wipe my ass after I drunkenly took a dump during post-21st birthday shenanigans. Amuses me now, but I was embarrassed for a long time after. I know you'll never love me. I wish I had arped you that time we were alone in a room. While we were both drunk and kinda alone at another party. My friend through 20 years broke down in the middle of a bar and told me. A guy from our high school class arped her at a party in 10th grade. And none of us heard her cry from the room upstairs. This happened to me once. By 3-5 dudes at once. Still haven't told anyone. I'm too scared not to be believed. I think it's my scariest memory. It still gives me panic attacks if I think of it and don't immediately distract myself with different thoughts actions. When I was 16 I had a job as a dishwasher at a local bar. So being around drunk people was sort of the norm for me. Though one day Steve, who is like a 50-something-year-old guy who works in the kitchen with me, comes and gets drunk on his day off. No big deal. Go ahead. It got weird though when he came into the kitchen and cried to me about how his boyfriend left him. And how good I could make him feel if I gave him a quick blowjob. Of course this caught me way off guard as I was 16 and I'm not even homosexual. So I just left the kitchen and found other stuff to do. I didn't really want to talk to Steve after that. I quit the job shortly after anyway. Drunk girl that was hitting on me randomly went on a rant that it was unfair that her friend has slept with 30 odd people and was STD free. Yet she had only slept with like 15 and ended up with herpes. I mean, what was I meant to do with that? You know. Once, a dude wearing a Tigger costume walked into a Halloween house party I was in. It was like 4 AM so we were all already smashed. He sat on my lap and tried to convince me that I am a trans guy, and should transition and date him. Then he told me in detail how he violently hates his mum and exactly how he would like to murder and dismember her. He then also tried to convince me that I hate my mother, I do not, and I should kill her. When I said no, he yelled at me, left through the front door and threw himself down the stairs. He was fine. Was making out with a drunk girl and she wanted to FCK and she said she was on birth control. We didn't FCK cause I didn't want to have sex with a drunk girl. 2 weeks later we're both sober and she wants to hook up but she wasn't on birth control so I had to get condoms. Later on that night she told me she hasn't been on birth control in months. Bullet dodge because you are a decent human being. Good job. I was an accident. Usually my mom says like, oh, I always wanted kids and wanted to get pregnant young. But nope. During a wine-filled rant about life she revealed I was, in fact, an accident. I kinda figured. She was 17. Last night I was at a comedy club. It was the 9-11 set. Due late enough that most people had probably had dinner and some pre-show drinks. This one couple was seated at the front. Center table. Literally at the base of the mic stand. Through 3 different comedians he's hooting and hollering. Clapping at everything. Laughing at jokes during the setup etc. Classic drunk distraction. So finally the third comedian decides to lay into him a bit. He claims to have been together with the woman for 20 years. She corrects him. 6 months. When asked about his job. He claims to be in the miracle business. She corrects. Real estate. When asked about having troubles in relationships, he offers, brags. Really, that he went to prison for 3 years for selling 200 pounds of weed each month. Sure. A bit awkward this drink ass is hijacking the show to talk about selling drugs at wholesale. As the comic is figuring out where to take this, the drunk guy follows up. Don't worry. My friend drunkenly told me his mother molested him when he was a kid and I am the only person who ever knows. Instantly understood why sometimes he doesn't want to be at home alone with his mom at times. casually mentioning that an ex-boyfriend arped her, then promptly attempting to sexually assault me. You could say I was caught off guard. I had a neighbor. She was young and a serious alcoholic. She'd been a nurse before I met her but was under some type of investigation because pills at her job had gone missing. One night she was super drunk and told me that she had put pillows over some of the elderly patients' faces and suffocated them because she couldn't stand to see them suffer anymore, bed sores and just in pain. I asked her about it when she'd sobered up and she denied saying that to me. She passed away about 3 years ago, so I'll never know if what she said was true or not. A story as told to me by my boss. His neighbor passed away from brain cancer. She had been fighting it on and off for about 15 years. Because of the chemo for all those years she had been unable to conceive, but she and her husband wanted a family. They decided to adopt. They adopted a 6-month-old boy that had come for a troubled home. I didn't get more details than that. The kid is about 10 years old now and has all kinds of issues. He is suspected of killing his puppy. He hurts and bullies my boss's son. Stories of a budding sociopath. After the wife passes away, my boss went over to his house for some company. The guy gets pissed up and confesses to my boss, I gotta get rid of Nathan, the adopted son. He says he never bonded with him and he doesn't want to deal with him anymore now that the wife is gone. I heard you have the biggest dick from your friend group. Just because I don't have any friends. Having some drinks at my friend's house with her fiance. I've met this dude twice at this point. We were in the middle of a beer pong game when he says he has a confession. He then goes into a room and brings back this giant dildo. He proceeds to tell his fiance and myself he bought it because he likes to stick it in his ass while jacking off. I laugh instantly because I think the whole thing is a joke. I mean, why the FCK would you tell a stranger this? My friend, his fiance, goes to crying hysterically and I realize it is not a joke. He says he has had it for a few years now and has always wanted her to know, and he felt this was the perfect opportunity. I spent the rest of the night convincing my friend he still loves her and that doesn't change who he is. I mean, come on. Everyone has their fetishes. I do not judge in any way. But keep them private and to yourself and your significant other. This is a less weird and more funny story my uncle heard. But I feel it's worth posting here. A few guys were drunk one day, so they decided to go about messing around and moved all the markers in the ground on a construction site for a big building. Apparently, nobody noticed until after construction had been completed. And the construction company had to knock the whole thing down and rebuild it. They probably only admitted this to my uncle because they were drunk when they told the story. I had been talking to a guy for a while. He was friends with my best friend. He had a crazy ex-GF who was trying to pin a bunch of shit on him and called him abusive, etc. I didn't believe it because he was cute and I was young and dumb. One night we were over at my best friend's place drinking. And later on in the night when we all went to pass out, me and him in guest room, he started telling me how everything she said was true. And how he had put his hands around her neck and did all this other shit. The next day he didn't remember anything and kept trying to kiss me etc. I told my friend what had happened and we never spoke to him again after that. Also, his ex ended up pressing charges. So thankfully there was a little justice there. This guy I used to buy drugs off of did some cocaine and told me how he left some girl to die of an OD one time. I ghosted him immediately. A good friend of mine started crying out of nowhere and said he had cancer. I was so shocked and felt horrible. But I was very grateful he told me cause he said he had been hiding it for months. Turned out he was full of shit. Next day he didn't remember a thing and had no idea what I was talking about. I had an ex-boyfriend tell me he was arped by a family member while we were rolling on ecstasy. I was not ready for that and it kept me up for years just thinking about what he went through. I was out with a group of friends and one of the girls started asking what our sexual kinks are. It went around the table. Pretty normal stuff like candles and bondage. Then it got to one guy and he just growled out the word kids. After some clarification and resisting the urge to punch him, I just left. Seriously. What do you do in that situation? You don't resist the urge to punch him. So not terrifying at all. But weird. Met a guy who had a f***ing sweet home. Had a horde of futuristic tech. Including a fingerprint reading front door lock, considering this was like 10 years ago. And it wasn't a rich area. It was a big deal. He drunkenly told me he got paid a 6-figure salary to go into huge multinational companies and tell them what looked shitty. He didn't even have to say what to do instead. He wouldn't tell me how I could also do this job. Not a confession I heard. But one I told when I got too drunk. I was telling my friends how I missed my friend who died in a car accident, and I told them I was trying to suppress my feelings during the funeral. Next thing you know, I was bawling my eyes out and saying he didn't deserve to die at 19. Still remember my friends trying to calm me down, but I missed him like he was my brother. Still do even after I sobered up. In 2006 my mom's boyfriend told me he killed a man and told me how he did it. He told me it was the best way to kill a person and I needed to know for self-defense. My mother had allowed us to have a party at her house and we were all pretty drunk at the time. The story gets really weird weeks later when my friend is over and she has a picture of her deceased father on her keychain. My mom's boyfriend freaks out and takes me aside and explained that was the man he killed years ago. I was always under the assumption that he was just found dead from like a heart attack or something, but actually he was murdered the same way my mom's boyfriend described to me. I researched a little and found that it was in fact a cold case from about 2000 or 2001. I called the tip line number and told them what I knew, but as far as I know nothing ever came of it. My mom's boyfriend is dead now and I still believe he murdered my friend's dad. A college friend was helping me clean a gash on the back of my head and was drunkenly trying to make me feel better. She did this by telling me about a time she had messed with her ex-boyfriend by blowing on his dick when he asked her to blow him. He responded by smashing her head through a glass table. This wasn't just alcohol, I think. But I might have heard a guy confess to deliberately driving his car into a canal to destroy the evidence. He was trying to destroy the canal that he had drowned someone in. I was drinking with some of my floor mates in college and one of the girls, whom I've never had a real conversation with before, starts telling us about how her uncle molested her when she was a child. Had no idea how to react. Drunk at a block party, our next door neighbor admitted she was sexually abused as a kid and tried to get physical with my husband within the span of half an hour. I don't know if she remembers. Was on leave from the army with some mates and met a fellow from an adjacent unit. We all proceeded to get good and drunk when the fellow from the other unit told us about how he fabricated an after-action report because he had killed a local and reported that he felt threatened. We discussed it the next day when sobering up and ran it up the chain of command. Turns out he never actually did what he claimed to do, but was probably thinking about it and described his plan to us in a way that made it sound like he'd already done it. About 2 weeks later, Scuttlebutt said that he was quietly sent to another base for reasons. My uncle told a bunch of strangers in a bar that if I wasn't his niece he would totally bang me. Bit awkward. My ex-boyfriend told me that his high school girlfriend was sexually assaulted by her doctor. He burned that doctor's office to the ground in the middle of the night. My parents were both drunk and got in a fight which escalated their emotions apparently. And my stepdad had a mental breakdown due to the situation and came in my room to vent about it. And basically admitted to me that when he was 16 he got a girl pregnant and they had my stepbrother. And choked her during an argument. She didn't press charges because her mother said don't ruin his life over it. So that's how he got away with it. After that he started talking about how he's actually killed people and how he's really about that life. Spent his teenage years hustling and selling drugs and never got caught cause he had a fake idol some shitty. All the years I've known this guy we barely talked and he threw all this at me one random night where I barely knew what was going on, lol. Not long ago my friend was outside for a smoke at a small house party and a girlfriend of a mutual friend came up to him and decided to let him know that she had gotten an abortion earlier that week. She didn't even introduce herself. Just went straight to that. This is a doozy. I was about 22 and went out drinking with my co-worker who was the same age. We're both women. And she asked me if I ever looked at PRN. I said sure. She said she'd stumbled across some child pornography and it confused her because the kids looked like they enjoyed it. So she looked up more to find out if it was really so bad. I freaked out and tried to explain that it was illegal to look at and that children can experience sexual pleasure while being damaged. She clearly thought she was just innocently researching the subject and didn't seem to understand why I was so upset. An older co-worker we both liked and trusted explained the same thing to her. I have no idea if she was a pedophile. I just didn't get why looking at child pornography for any reason is bad. Outside of law enforcement. Close bracket. 10 years later I'm still wary of co-workers. Some things you're better off not knowing. I work at a bar and our staff had a huge problem with heroin a couple years ago. It was to the point that management was regularly having to sweep the bathroom for needles. Anyway, one of the guys was a friend of mine and I thought he was an overall good guy despite his crippling addiction. One night we were having a few drinks after work and he got a little too drunk and admitted that a couple months prior he had bought stuff from someone he didn't know and didn't trust, so he called up a girl he'd used with before and told her he had stuff and could he come over. He let her go first and she immediately had a terrible reaction to whatever was in the drugs, seizing and ODing in front of him. He left her house without notifying the police or trying to help. He OD'd himself a couple months after. Holy shit. So not only did he use her to test his drugs, but didn't even call it in when she OD'd. True scum of the earth behavior. Bartender here. So many stories. Probably most terrifying is the woman who came into my bar years ago and had 2 shots and a drink and was real quiet for the first hour. Then she called me over and asked if I could call the police. I said what was the problem. She then told me that she had just stabbed and sliced the neck of a mugger in the alley and wanted to make sure he was dead first before she reported it. Note: police were called. Mugger found dead. Woman not arrested or charged. She denied ever telling me that she wanted to wait an hour before calling the police, claimed that she had passed out in the alley and woke up then came into the bar in shock. My male best friend at the time confessed me while drunk that he wanted to abuse my female best friend and that just the idea of it made him hard. Since the only way to get to her was with my help, he insisted that it would be great for us 3 to go to a separate room. We were at a party. He said that while he was with her I could either watch or join them since I was also pretty F-capable. Of course. I told him to go to hell. I grabbed my best friend and we both left the party. Needless to say, I broke ties with him and he can't get close to us. The 3 of us were 17 at the time. Not me, but a friend. He was out with a girl he didn't know too well and they got drunk. She said she was initiated into a gang. They just collected stray people they didn't know, took them to a warehouse, beat them up, and when they were thoroughly beaten broken down, she and the other recruits administered an overdose of heroin, killing them. There are weird people out there. You need to be careful.